2nd of May 2011, the founder of Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, was killed by a team of American Navy SEALs after they entered Pakistan by helicopter and raided his residence. According to the Sydney Morning Herald Online, US President Barack Obama authorised the operation and watched the whole thing through cameras mounted on soldiers' helmets. After an intense firefight, bin Laden's body was captured and buried at sea after his identity was confirmed. News reached the American public soon after, and hundreds celebrated outside the White House in Washington, singing the national anthem and waving American flags. 4 days later, Al-Qaeda confirmed bin Laden's death and vowed to avenge him. Bin Laden became infamous after Al-Qaeda members hijacked 4 airliners on September the 11th, 2001. The first 2 hit the World Trade Center towers in New York, destroying them. The third plane hit US military headquarters, and the fourth crashed in a paddock en route to the White House. Almost 3,000 innocent people died in what became known as the 9/11 attacks. Bin Laden claimed responsibility in 2004. What followed became known as the War on Terror. A $50 million bounty was placed on bin Laden's head. Since the attacks, the image of bin Laden with his traditional headwear and beard became an icon for evil around the world. Ah, Nick and Dave, the memories. But tell us, what does this have to do with difference and dominance? Bin Laden's rise and fall raises questions about collective identities and otherness. Since the attacks, the zone of difference between the Islamic world and the West has widened. Bin Laden has managed to polarise a diverse collection of people whose only commonality is their Islamic faith into the West's other, or the repository of our fears. How does a Saudi Arabian psychopath who convinced his fanatical followers to kill thousands of civilians lead people to believe that an Islamic woman in an Australian shopping centre should be viewed as a potential terrorist, or an Afghan child needs to be placed in a detention centre? Bin Laden has assumed a collective identity as the enemy of the West on behalf of all Muslims, and the West has legitimised this identity to maintain its dominance and protect its global interests, and the United States the right to cross borders at will and eliminate potential threats. So Nick, we've got an issue that we've deconstructed to try and mediate difference and dominance. Now we just need to come up with some rich learning experiences. I was thinking we could explore the geopolitical machinations taking place in the Middle East dating back to the Second World War, or even earlier. The students could study the West's involvement, like the creation of Israel and Iraq, oil, the Gulf Wars, things like that. What do you think?
Well Dave, firstly, do you know what geopolitical machinations mean?
Not really, no.
I didn't think so.
I figured we could just rent some Michael Moore DVDs, sit back, ask some questions at the end, lesson over.
How does Bowling for Columbine fit in?
Higher order thinking? Perhaps this can be plan B. What ideas do you have?
I don't think we need to focus directly on the issue. We're teaching Year 5, so we don't want to scare them after all. The way I see it, to be transformative educators, we have to narrow the zone of difference between the students' collective identity and that of Islamic people. We can look for common ground rather than relying on negative stereotypes.
We probably should find out exactly what students' perceptions of Muslims are. It might be unfair to assume they're all negative.
Sure, it would be great if all the students held positive views about different cultures, but given the images students are bombarded with in the media, we'll most likely find some Islamophobia.
Islamophobia?
Yes, it's a form of racism directed against Muslims. It occurs as a result of things like the 9/11 attacks, the Bali bombings, and Middle Eastern asylum seekers. I guess it's a view that the difference between our identity and the Islamic identity is too grey to mediate. Our learning experiences should start with a reference point. What views do the students hold? Have an exploration of Islamic culture, and then revisit those views and see if attitudes have changed.
So a brainstorming session might be a good place to start.
I think so. Get all the stereotypes written up on the board, good and bad. The class can explore, why do you think Muslims are treated differently? Some answers might be, they're like Osama bin Laden, they look and dress funny, or they're just not like us. Then students can write their own personal and maybe family perceptions down in their journals, which they can refer back to later to see whether any of those views have changed.
We can start to mediate. You mentioned earlier about being bombarded with negative media images. Perhaps students could gather images from newspapers or movies and TV shows to put up on a notice board. You don't often see positive portrayals of Islamic people. It's generally either a shot of a war zone, a terrorist attack, or a village with someone herding goats.
I think it was Edward Said who stated that the West views the Orient as exotic and inferior.
Edward Said, you say?
Yes, you only have to look at the character like Borat to see how Muslims are portrayed: backward, stupid and aggressive. The collection of images might show students how we are given an unfair and slanted view of what it is to be Muslim.
Our insightful presentation earlier claimed that bin Laden had created an Islamic collective identity. Any thoughts on how we can get the kids thinking about that?
I do, as a matter of fact. The main point we need to get across is that there is no Muslim world. I think we could show the class various countries in the world that have practicing Muslims as part of their population and reinforce the fact that all kinds of diverse people can be and are Muslim. This will demonstrate that there is not one stereotypical Muslim, the one that looks like Osama bin Laden. After this, students will select a country, for example, the Sudan or Indonesia, and divide into groups. The students will then research their selected country's culture and look at the way Muslims live in their chosen country, what they wear, and how they practice their faith.
Right, and once that's done, students can start to compare their research to the images they've gathered and start to see that we may be only getting one side of the story. I'm still trying to think of a positive pop culture portrayal of a Muslim. Do you think I Dream of Jeannie counts?
Who?
Never mind. Maybe as a follow-up from that project, the class could get some input from the Islamic community.
Yeah, after all, Muslims make up 6% of the population of Queensland, so it's possible someone in the class or connected to the school might like to come and share a bit about their background, their beliefs and so on.
I suppose the best way of finding out what makes people tick is to get to know them, take a walk in their shoes, so to speak.
Do you suggest an excursion to Dubai?
Yeah, sure, that's one option, but if for some reason that doesn't happen, I've heard of an organisation that runs a website which allows students in different countries to make contact with each other, work together on projects or just correspond. The class could get in touch with the students in countries like Pakistan, Afghanistan and so on.
I could see how that would tie in with the students' research project. They could get a deeper understanding of different cultures by actually speaking to people living within those cultures. If we can humanise people who identify as Islamic, then maybe we can get students to really think about the way Muslims are viewed. People seem to accept things like racist attitudes right through to civilian deaths in places like Pakistan. It would be nice if we could play a part in changing that.
After that examination, the students can revisit their original journal entries and hopefully see that any negative stereotypes may have changed.
I think all this would be a worthwhile exercise, Dave. The Australian curriculum aims to develop intercultural understanding among students. It asks students to compare the experiences of other with their own, looking for commonalities and differences between their lives and seeking to understand these. What we've proposed should achieve that aim.
I think you're right, Nick.
Do you reckon anyone will work out we're reading from a script?
Not a chance. It's seamless.